Folks, we are on the Building Your VCSO Practice, a Growth Path for MSPs series. This is session 4 of 6. Jesse, it's been so much fun getting you on these conversations because you have so much firsthand practical execution level experience that this is exactly, I think, what people need to be hearing regularly on a consistent basis to get that mindset kind of going and start doing things. And we had originally called this session Scaling Your VCSO Practice for Mid-Size MSPs. And it was at a time when we had planned all the titles before we had really developed the content in full. And we've tweaked it a little bit, even though a lot of the content is the same, the title changed slightly. So please don't be judgmental about the change in title. This session is called Implementation of Your Processes and Offerings. Now, joining me is Jesse Miller. If you don't know Jesse already, his alter ego is Cow Farmer. And so there's always great stories that I see Jesse posting on LinkedIn, correlating cow farming to VCSO and cybersecurity. I love those. Just nothing like a good steak analogy to make you think about security, right? So, and I'm Luis, I'm with ScalePad, and thanks for joining us on this session number 4. Now, last session, the recap of session 3, and you can find all these on the website where we have all the future sessions as well. And you can go in and plug your information in and download all the resources that we've shared in the previous sessions, because all of them had templates or resources or things that are going to help you in the process of standing up and launching your VCSO offering. Session 3, we were talking about rules of engagement, a lot of that stuff around mindset, enablement, empathy, getting the client goals front and center of this planning so that it's not a bit of that MSP-centric view where the client doesn't really understand why the things are needed and so on. And importantly, I think the United Front, we talked a little bit about that, because even in service desk and VCIO, this happens where, an account manager or a VCIO is trying to get a customer to understand the need to do a certain project, but maybe they're being undermined a little bit by the help desk or an on-site engineer or things like that. And so you really have to make sure everybody is agreeable to the plan and the front that you're presenting to clients along the plane. We also brought up the risk assessment process, beautiful PDF that Jesse was very generous to share, kind of outlining a bit of the swim lanes from a role perspective and what are all the different activities and processes that you might need to think about and implement. And so today we're kind of expanding on a lot of these processes across the whole go-to-market shift, which is to sell, to onboard, and to deliver. And so we're going to tackle those and just have a good conversation about all these things that you need to be thinking about. There's a number of resources we'll bring up. We'll also be sharing those as part of the webinar content also. So keep that in mind. Any questions, drop them into the Q&A as we go. We try address them as we're in that particular topic at the moment. And feel free to banter in the chat as well. I like the engagement there whenever possible. This is the page that has all the resources from the previous sessions. So if you haven't seen that already, Julie, I know, is backstage. If you don't mind grabbing that link and also dropping that in the chat, folks can easily find it later on. And today's agenda, we're going to talk about this really cool thing Jesse has, the Dress for Success framework. Talk about all the major processes that you need to think about, have in place really before trying to stand up this thing. One of the things we talk often about is the old baggage of the VAR mentality of waiting for a client to raise their hand and say, I think we need compliance. And then suddenly starting to figure out along the way how to do it because the client asked for it. And I think you have to have a lot of setup ahead of time before really trying to offer this in the first place. Otherwise, you hit a brick wall. Yeah. And then those processes across the sell, onboard, and deliver framework, the Dress for Success framework that Jesse was so kind to share with us today. So this has been the overall roadmap that we've been following as we develop this series. And today we're really in that implement section. Coming up on October 2nd is the iterate and launch component. So just really trying to take you from Genesis and thinking and design all the way to actually putting an offering out in market and operating successfully with it. And if you don't know about PowerGrid already, PowerGrid is Jesse's peer group platform where you can really get the support, the strategy, the consulting, the advice to not sort of misstep along the way. We'll have links to PowerGrid, but you can also visit powergrid.group. Jesse, feel free to drop that link in the chat if folks want to check out that ecosystem, which is super powerful to get you going.
Will do.
All right, so from planning to execution mode, let's kick off with a quick poll. I love these because it helps us a bit of understanding of where everybody is in their journey. And so this first poll, and forgive a bit of the maybe different language here, but onboarding and processes are pretty critical. And we often have this echo chamber, tribal knowledge way of doing things. And so new people come on board and they're kind of like trying to figure things out. So just trying to get a sense of how well documented your processes for onboarding are at the moment.
And I think last week, right, we talked about that risk assessment process, and that was kind of a lead in to what we're going to be getting into today is really once we've gotten our go-to-market set up, we understand who our target clients are, we kind of understand what our offer looks like. Now we really need to start putting where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, and say we have to actually do this now and set up a repeatable way for our organization to be able to deliver this on repeat in a profitable manner, right? And so that starts with process design and process delivery, and we're going to talk about that today.
So about 68% have responded. There's about 7 folks already responding to printer failure tickets on the side there. But if we can get your engagement, that'd be great. I'll give you guys 5 more seconds here if you want to pop in and pick one of these options. And there may be other options here. The other thing is these polls are not finite the way we present them usually, but it's just to get a bit of a sense. All right, let me share this out to the group. And any surprises here, Jesse?
No, I think we talked about when we came up with these polls, and you and I had a real fun time with the title on this one, right? Or the question, I should say. But yeah, I think that is not surprising to me. I think we sometimes we reactively create process, as we know we should have a process for something. It just is, we're busy, we're doing other things, and then something bad happens or something big happens, and we're like, okay, we got to now get this process done. So we see processes in place for events that have already happened, but yet there are still big items out there that need to be documented and are still tribal knowledge. And so you see that about 50% of the group said we have some major processes that we still need to actually codify. So not surprising. Yeah. I think that's pretty standard for most of us.
For sure. And that's kind of the objective today, is kind of getting ahead of not having to do these reactively, right, as you're trying to launch a whole new service offering, which can be, ambiguous in the first little while.
Well, yeah, we talk about, we'll talk about this in the Dress for Success framework. Good intro to the next slide, I guess. But really having our go-to-market linked with how we deliver service and how we do onboarding and how we do everything else means that our talk matches our walk almost perfectly. And that creates a really good customer success loop with the client when their first experience with us is us doing exactly what we said we would do. So yeah, that's really done in this Dress for Success framework that I've developed, and is what the PowerGrid VC system is really based on, right? Is the 5 stages of the customer journey. And you hear people talk about the buying journey all the time, right? But that ends at the sales made, now what? Well, it's all linked, right? When we are marketing and selling, we're actually it's a prelude to delivering service. And then when we're delivering service, we're actually marketing and selling at the same time through our customer success. So this is all interlinked. So what do these things mean? So discovery, that's how we talk about and message our service. It's really our marketing activities, right? Requisition is our sales and solutioning process, right? How do we sell? How do we take the client through the funnel? How do we solution design? How do we make sure that we're getting right fit clients? All those kinds of things. Engagement, that's our onboarding. That's when the client gets that first experience of, they said they would do all this stuff. We came in, we're riding high, and then can we actually deliver on it? Services is, right, service delivery, how we ongoing provide value through the service that we're giving to them. And then stewardship is that customer success or account management phase. So stewardship, I love that word, because we're looking at it as like ownership and partnership with the client, meaning that the client has trusted us with their resources, with their business, and we need to be good stewards of that in the way we execute on that. It means being ethical, but that also means being ethical for ourselves and for our people as well. So there's two sides to that coin. We have to be paid fairly, and we have to make sure that we are getting just as much out of this relationship as the client is.
One of the discovery things that we've been talking a lot about as we get out into market with customer success mindset is a great quote that Chris Day uses a lot, which is the questions you ask determine the relationship you have. And I think in the discovery piece, it's really important to question or challenge yourself in whether the way you're asking questions is focused on the client's journey and the client's objectives, as opposed to the things that you're trying to achieve, from a purely MSP centric perspective.
Right.
So that's a great one to keep in mind, to remind you to always focus on the client's journey specifically. So in the GTM framework, obviously sell is a bit of the number one thing to think about. And the way we're going to approach a bit of these processes is we're going to divide them into sell, onboard, deliver, and talk through each of those individual, stages is the best way to describe it, because it is a cycle ultimately. But you kind of have to understand a bit of that flow of the funnel, so to speak, and what things you want to be up and running with before you even start to offer something to the market. So Jesse, let's talk through some of these, and I know we have some resources. I'll bring those up as we address them and get into that.
Yeah. So again, these are now we're talking process today. So I think you want to have a codified process for each one of these things. So you want to have your go-to-market plan, meaning like all of our messaging, our value pillars. And we talked about this in session 2, but just remember that stuff now all needs to be actioned. So we need in the go-to-market workbook that's there for you, we have some ideas and some things, really just putting this down on paper. What channels are we going to use? What kind of metrics are we going to govern to ensure that we're actually going to market and doing the things and the activities that we need to do to start generating leads to get out there? So there's a host of different things that you could do. And there's some suggestions in the book about, working with partners, what channels are we going to go to, what conferences are we going to do, how are we going to do social marketing, all those things, right? So there's some goal or some, you see here, we're practicing what we preach with outcome oriented goals, and then an OKR structure for those. So we have an objective and then key results there on the right. So just a reminder that we need to have this all defined as a process, right? So we take an OKR structure, we take this, we have those defined, and then now our teams can go say, okay, these are the things we're going to do. We're going to make, 100 calls a day, or our BDRs are going to do events here, here, and here. And we're going to have a booth here, here, and here. And we're going to partner with these for 4 webinars on these topics, right? So creating processes around how we do that, rather than like, oh, shoot, we should really do another webinar this quarter, right? We need to have a process for this. We need to make it repeatable, because then it's not you as the MSP owner or you as the department head having to drive that. You can hand it off and people can actually execute on it and become sustainable in the organization, right?
So this work will also be in this session's resources, even though it was something we talked a little bit about in session 2.
Yeah.
It's just nice in the frame of reference of the actual conversation we're having today to offer it again.
Right.
So lots of good detail in the workbook that I think it's worthwhile having to use as a template as you build out your own thing.
Yeah.
Now, packaging and pricing, this feels like one of those things that MSPs are evolving interestingly into, of like productizing services successfully.
Yeah.
In the Power Grid vCISO system, it feels like a lot of time is probably spent on packaging and pricing, because this is probably like one of the biggest things, like, well, what do I charge for this? That's sort of one of the biggest blockers to actually get something out in market. What can you say about packaging and pricing here?
Yeah. So 2 things. I want to talk about the process quickly, and then I'll just talk about some basic numbers and what I'm seeing, right? So packaging and pricing, you need to have a repeatable solution design process or a quote to cash process, right? If you don't have that workflowed out, you need to get that on paper, right? And have people agree to it, because all sorts of go backs and slowdowns and friction happen in the customer's buying experience if that is not handled effectively. Of course, we have all that in the grid, but what I'm saying is, just an example, a large MSSP I was working with was going into a private equity opportunity. for a portfolio company. We came in with our package, our messaging, we come in that productization, and the customer during the call did what some customers do, like, well, I think we're different. I think we're special. We need these special things, right? Well, what did we do? We had our package and our pricing and our process. So we looked at our package and said, actually, the things they said they need are in this package. But because we have a template, because we have a process, what are we able to do? Change a few bullet points on the quote to repeat what they said they need that's special back to them. Keep the packaging pricing the same for our service delivery team and spin that quote around in 24 hours. The customer made the comment that this is the fastest I've ever gotten a quote back. Right. And so do you think you've reduced friction and put yourself in the lead for that opportunity? Absolutely. And so this is why that process is so important. Now,
The other thing I'll say about process that I think has been a learned experience for me is that we have maybe the default setting of talking about solutions, like the end result a lot. But I think prospects and customers are probably more compelled to align to how are we going to work together? What is the process that's going to take us from A to B, that end solution? But so few times do I see MSPs really talking about the process as part of their sales, go to market.
Yeah, it's one thing that we have in our pitch deck template, specifically for vCISO services, is that, of course, you set value prop first, but then you need that specific, like, how do we get there? TLDR, like, paint me the picture of how we get there. And you saw that in the roadmap of how we designed the vCISO program at the outset of this. Is something similar to that is really helpful, right? So I think you're right. And then that speaks to what we're talking about in these later bullet points of sample deliverables, leave behinds, for them to really feel the tangible outcome of the program, and like, what do I get and how do I work with you, and what's the feel, what's it going to look like, rather than just what am I excited about it.
And I think that, that little italicized text there of let's talk about timelines is interesting, because in that process conversation is where you can actually set many of the expectations around timelines. And it's not lost on me that vCISO may feel like a project initially. We're going to kick off this thing, we're going to start this thing, but it's ultimately a program, not a project. And so you might be selling it like this thing that's going to be finished in X amount of time, but the reality is it's infinite, right?
Yeah, we talked about this in our prep session, and it's one thing that I was very adamant. I do not like timelines on cybersecurity roadmaps, because you paint yourself into a corner, and there's so many things that are outside of your control. If you get in and the client's technical teams have responsibilities that they're not completing, you can document that all you want. But at the end of the day, when you go to an executive meeting and they're like, well, we're only halfway to where you said we would be. And you're like, well, it's actually your people that weren't doing that. Like, you do not want to get into that position. So what you want to be is, here's how we get from here to there. And now we're going to start executing and moving through that. And then they're more involved in the process, and you didn't paint yourself into a corner. So yeah, I do not like timelines, especially in the pre-sales process, on when we're going to get this done. Now, only a Sith speaks in absolutes is the quote, right? So there are certain things with compliance, like we need to be compliant by this date. Okay, well, here's all the things that need to happen, right? So that might be a project as part of your vCISO program, right? But again, this is a program, and that's a rider onto it. So I know we have to move on here, but last thing, we wanted to just give a quick hint on pricing. In the power grid, all the MSPs we work with, which is about 50 at this point, I'd say on the low end, really like vCISO light, quote unquote, packages, which don't call them that to the customer, it devalues them. But as far as we're referring to them, I see probably to stay profitable, you want to be around $3,500 US. Okay, at the low end on a package. I have seen some of our partners go down to like 2,500, but that is really, this depends on your target market, right? And the services you're providing and what they require. So to stay profitable, that's really the lowest you can go on a vCISO package for the level of support you need to give to a customer. Now on the high end, we see with mid-market SEC type regulated companies, we're seeing as high as $15,000 a month for just the vCISO program. That's not MSP, that's not security, that's just the vCISO advisory. Those are the two outliers. Now in the center, where we see most of these programs being sold at, is between the $5,000 to $8,000 range. So, we basically depending on how much they need, whether there's compliance or not, things like that. That's typically the sweet spot for where we're seeing most of these deals close.
Just quickly on the feature definition, mainly because it occurs to me that as somebody doing this for the first time, the
Mhm.
propensity to be MSP centric in the feature definition is maybe quite high, as
Yeah.
opposed to really focus on the client journey.
Yeah.
You know, how have you worked with MSPs in developing true client journey centric
Yeah.
feature definitions around,
Yeah.
what the service actually is?
Yeah. I want to answer Jeff's question because I wasn't specific. He said, is that pricing monthly or annually? So that's a per month. That's a monthly charge that we're charging. So annually, 80 to 120K per contract is typical for the large amount that are closing. So to your point about the feature definitions, 100%. Again, with the templates that we provide, it's like this is part of that go to market, and this is that linked dress for success journey that we're going to talk about, right? Because discovery and requisition link into our service delivery, link into our what does the customer want, the customer success. So the customer defined success. Again, I was just working with an MSP on this last week where we actually went through and said, let's talk about GRC, and there's governance, there's risk compliance. Okay, here's what the things the customer wants. They want a TPRM program because they need to sell to large corporations. They want an AI program and data classification program because they have these AI initiatives that have to be compliant with the corporations they're selling to. So those two things match up to our package here. All right. So our feature definition then talks about how they can answer DDQs efficiently, how they can be nimble with AI, and all these parts of our program that actually map to what the client's doing and what their business outcomes are. So the feature definitions, the features are the results for their business that they get in the package.
So powerful. It's just a very, very small pivot in the mindset, right? So
It's funny because after that session, you saw the light bulbs come on, and it's like, whoa, why haven't we been thinking about this? It's just one step further, and it's really not all that difficult, right?
yeah. Okay, so let's hit a second poll here.
A
Can
lot of
you
crying
onboard
going on.
a new customer without them crying? You know, there's this funny conversation I was having recently, or somebody that says, is your customer happiest when they sign the contract, and it's all downhill from there. Um, I think this is one of those areas where it's either really evident that it's a shit show, or it's really evident that you have a process in place. Everything from collecting information about people and assets and the documentation process, et cetera, to just setting up the customer administratively to get started. And we're not talking just about vCISO here, obviously, because any new relationship, you're kind of establishing a bit of what they expect on a go forward basis after that initial onboarding experience. But one of the biggest things that we talked about when we were talking about this poll is basically the death valley that is the handoff between sales and onboarding, or even from onboarding to help desk, for that stable support. Both of
Right.
those places are critical areas where the customer might be completely handed off to a new person that they never even knew existed until that moment. And it's such a missed opportunity. Somebody was talking about, like, when you go in to talk to a prospect about a sales opportunity, by the time they sign the contract, they should know what working with their VCIO or VCISO after the fact is going to look like and feel like, so that
Right.
none of it comes really as a surprise.
Yeah, there's that ultimate of selling this highly trust defined service. You're going to have this strategic relationship. We're going to be an extension of your team. And oh, by the way, here's this person you never talked to before. Trust me, bro. It's like the discount, it's so discontiguous, right? So there needs to be links there, and we need to link those stages, meaning in the solution design process, you're meeting who your potential VC so looks like, or even if you're not, you're understanding what the stages are. So when that person comes in and picks up the ball running and does exactly what they expected, they're like, okay, I trust you immediately now.
Yeah, let's share these results here, and give me your thoughts on these results.
I'm really happy to see 36% that says sales hands off cleanly and onboarding runs like clockwork. I would want to see that for, I guess we should have probably asked specifically for as a VCSO program rather than just the MSP program, right? But
Sure.
that's good to see. And I think the other, we kind of expected that, right? There is a process, but details still fall through the cracks. And, I can't stress enough how important onboarding is, because that's the first true handoff to see, as I said, does our walk match our talk?
This is an area I think as people start to launch this offering, there might be a tendency to take on whatever work is kind of coming in. And you might, stress the system, to the breaking point. Daniel Priestley talks about create a little bit of FOMO, understand your capacity to delight in the
Mm-hmm.
process of onboarding. Because if you go in and you take all the customers, you just launch this and you got all this interest, and suddenly you find yourself onboarding more clients that you can really handle, then this is where this experience really starts to break down right from the get-go. It can be a
Oh,
challenge.
you're so right about that. And it's funny because we were talking about this in our office hours just recently. One of our partners who joined, and like they're having a bunch of success, right? Because they built their go-to-market and they're keyed in on what their clients want. Now they're getting these opportunities. And he said, man, I'm so overwhelmed with the onboardings right now. And so digging into it, it turned out, I'm like, well, you haven't implemented these onboarding processes perfectly yet. And so what do you need for influxes of work, which onboardings are, right? When you have a lot of onboardings, that's a wave that's going to eventually subside. But if you're really well processed out, you can bring in contractors and other people from other teams to execute modules within that onboarding to allow your VC so then to actually talk to the clients and do what they need to do. So it speaks volumes to having that process in place and being able to handle those surges by offloading work. Now we're talking like, the Phoenix project or the goal and the factory choke points and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. Which kind of gets us to this onboard section. And I think, maybe most people have kind of, through the process of just normal managed services and help desk onboarding, they've kind of figured out some of these processes, but maybe VCs will change a bit of the game. It's a slightly different focus. It's a slightly different sales process overall. Let's talk through some of these wherever you feel relevant.
yeah, I'm going to run down through the list, and we have some pieces of these that'll be in the folder this week. So the sales handoff, the onboarding project process, I think is really important. So we have just a simple project plan for all the major items that you want to do as a VC. So when you onboard a client, again, you'll have to, build out those individual pieces of that or join the power grid. Right. But this is actually an incident response process.
Oh yeah.
So we're going to talk about that in the service delivery portion.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it's a good visual because I want to talk about this quickly. Is really how I like to do process design is have a high level workflow that anyone in the organization can understand when we look at it. Then we have sub processes within each of these that are for specific departments and personnel who understand how to execute them. And if you're using, like we use Figma, right, to do our workflow design, but any of the newer designs will work. You can click in on those processes, and that allows people to see what their specific requirements are, but then zooming out and kind of understand, like a football play, where everyone's supposed to be on the field. Yeah, this is the onboarding project plan. Again, integrate, evaluate, develop, deploy, iterate. We're going to kick off, do info gathering, get introduced to the organization, and get our systems integrated. So we are primed to do all the stuff we need to do. Then we need to evaluate the client, do policy analysis, do controls analysis, do critical systems discovery. You might call that crown jewels or line of business applications, business impact analysis, and then perform our first risk assessment if we haven't done that as like a lead off already, as like an entry point. Then we need to make recommendations. We need to link data to critical systems, create and formalize a risk register, and then create an incident response plan, right? Once we've done that, we have a good understanding of the organization and what their complete footprint looks like. So at that point, we can say, we may have had a roadmap already, right? That may have been part of the sales process, or you might have done a risk assessment to get into the account. But at that point, you're going to adjust. Then launch the program, meaning meet with the leadership team, get consensus on the roadmap, make any final adjustments, and say, okay, we now have an incident response plan, roadmap to move forward, and we're all on the same page. Okay, that's the report. And then we start knocking out those projects, right? So you're going to have projects that come out of that. Finally, that's the ongoing then service delivery is assessing control efficacy, reporting and adjusting the roadmap, and then steady state activities, which is all the service delivery stuff that we'll talk about later.
Yeah, Simrich, I think is I hope I didn't mangle that name. How long does this onboarding template typically take? And I guess it depends on so many things, you know, client size, complexity, what it is they're trying to do. I think it's going to stem from the goals, but what's your take on?
Yeah, I think minimum it's going to take 30 days. I mean, you have a risk assessment in there. If you haven't done that already, you have a meeting with leadership that you got to coordinate. Typically, I see this take, excuse me, 90 days, about 90 days to get up and running in the organization. So you will be doing other things alongside this, but this is like you said, this is like the onboarding project. So I think it's so important to not be stuck in this like onboarding purgatory, which I think so many of us are familiar with from other services, is that we're a year down the road and we haven't technically done all the onboarding tasks. Mm-hmm. We talked about that in our process list, but this is why we have this, so that we can get this off of our plate. And, or if there's anything outstanding, we transition it to a steady state activity and say onboarding is complete now, or in service delivery, right? So we get that clean handoff, we get consensus from the client, and we continue then to rinse and repeat on service delivery. So it's very important to have a process for that as well.
Okay. All right. Well, back to the list. That was the onboarding project process.
Yeah. So we talked about the change management or conflict resolution process. We talked about the client documentation process. There's going to be that's basically part of the project plan, but then you want individual things for the client. Like, what do we need to get? A list of their policies, any previous incidents, a list of their critical systems, what are their regulatory concerns, any hot stove items. And then, so there's a long list of things you want to do there, right? But you want to have that documented. Again, we have a list of all the things we need from the client to actually then understand what we need to have operational or situational awareness in their organization. So there needs to be a process and a checklist for that. Change management is important, right? I talked about, we're doing this onboarding process and we come up to some things that, oh, we thought this was included. Oh yeah, remember you didn't sign up for the policy, the CMMC audit or something like that, right? Oh, by the way, we've got CMMC, right? or in the middle of onboarding, now we want to take on CMMC, right? So we cannot be shooting from the hip there. We have to have a change management process to say, okay, great, let's go scope this. Let's go put this into our dress for success loop, meaning that we're going to go now drop down to that stewardship phase and run our account management solution design process and quote to cash process, and that whole loop's then running. Because think about it, that's a lot that needs to happen there. And if we just say, oh yeah, we'll get to it, and it's like on the VC so to take care of it, you cannot do more than one or two of those. And now you see how this, like you mentioned, Luis, you take on too many customers and all of a sudden you just create a real problem for the program and customers start churning. Yeah, it's chaos. It's what I call the spiral of silos. And an MSP. I like that. Yeah.
And we called out project versus program here again, because I think this is one of those critical inflection points where you need to make the distinction of the things that have, you know, some kind of finite timeline versus the things that really are designed to be continuous, and that the customer has to design some of their own programs around as well, because it's not just the MSP design of the program. The customer has to stand up some of their own processes internally as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. I was having a conversation about this on LinkedIn this week. Is, you know, the core service needs to be MRR and outcome based. That's the way you add value. But you cannot account for, or should you account for, everything under that core service. So if somebody comes in and says, hey, I need a complete policy rewrite for this new thing we want to do. Okay, well, that's a project. Well, aren't you my VC? So, well, if you look, you know, in our outcomes, we said policy writing isn't included, and we covered that in our sales process, and we made sure that you opted out of that, maybe, right? So there's very clear edges on the outcomes for the service. And so typically, though, that's not what I see. Is that's not even a conversation. If they're like, hey, we know that outcomes cost money, and you've delivered far and above the outcomes we want, and oh, by the way, we want this new outcome. We understand that there's more value and more money to that. We're happy to pay for it. So it's a whole different relationship.
It reminds me of the contractor that has a boat that's called a change order.
Yeah. There's, well, with AI right now, and I posted about this today, there is literally years of renewals of data classification, protection, and identity SSO type projects that have been kicked down the can or kicked down the road for years in organizations at this point. So huge opportunity there with vCISO services.
Let's talk maybe about those last couple of bullet points, the transition to steady state and the customer success kickoff. Maybe a little nuance there in what you see is maybe assumptions that are made that kind of mess with the process a bit or the success of the long-term sustainability of the offering versus the things that are kind of important to very succinctly and articulately set expectations for on the kickoff.
Yeah. The transition to steady state, I think we kind of talked about that, right? There needs to be, hey, if we get to a point, we don't want to be in that purgatory and we have some items outstanding on the onboarding project plan, we transition those to service management. Like, okay, and we have like, we're going to launch the program, we're transitioning these. So there needs to be a process, meaning that it doesn't have to be something crazy, but needs to be defined. We meet with the customer, we launch the program, we talk about outstanding items, and we say, okay, now we're closing this project and we're transitioning to steady state, right? And so that clean process needs to happen, especially if there was somebody involved, like a project manager, which is, typical in larger organizations, that's helping assist with the vCISO onboarding. Okay, the project manager is going away. Your primary contact is now your vCISO. They're going to start their cadence meetings with you. That's where we'll handle any of this stuff going forward. Customer understands it's that TCP communication, right? We have an ACK. So a process for that is important because this leads into our customer success kickoff process. I always love the idea of now that this is done, you're going to see someone reach out to you to find out how your onboarding went, right? And find out how you felt. And so there's, we did it back with the MSP that I built my first vCISO program in. We did it with a separate party who didn't have any stake, or the customer didn't have any feeling towards. So they're a neutral kind of party in our organization that reached out and got feedback from the client. What could have worked better? How did it go? Anything we could have done better, right? And they're willing to talk to this person because they're somebody new and they don't have any level of, they're not shaded one way or the other, right? So that's the customer success kickoff process. And then taking those things, not just the things we did wrong and need to fix, of course, if there's that, we want to address it, but also if they said good things or they said certain things that were important to them, we kind of do like a mini ICP interview, and we take away things that they said that they liked or that were valuable. And then we flip that into our messaging and into our outreach and then talk about it and disseminate it to our salespeople. So there needs to be a process to take that data, ingest it, and then send it back out to the appropriate parties who can then leverage it to actually sharpen our messaging and be better with our clients in the future.
Love that. And we do have a document where we're trying to collate all the different processes. Maybe we'll bring it up in a second, but that'll be in the folder as well. And it's not, ultra comprehensive. This was going to be largely something customizable to your specific requirements and at what level you're deploying the offering, of course.
Yep.
So poll number 3, this is our last poll. And I kind of joked about this a little bit earlier. Is the client happiest when they sign the contract and it all goes downhill from there? And it's important to know because I think this is one of the critical areas where the client experience is maybe forgotten right after the sale is completed. And just kind of the stakeholders of the processes downstream are not as necessarily vested in that same experience as maybe the salesperson was to get the deal in the first place. So I think I don't want you to mail this answer in because I think we all would want to. We feel that what we do is we strengthen the relationship over time. But there's many points where that experience is maybe forgotten. It becomes MSP centric to some extent, but we'll see what we get here. About 63% responded. 5 seconds.
Yeah, I would say if it's our best relationships get stronger over time, if that's your default answer, how do you know? So that would be my question.
we've been saying this with some of this customer success motion conversation we've been having, is that we make a lot of assumptions about that. We don't
Hmm.
often stop to ask clients what their experience has been in the process, or ask true business outcome or client centric questions about that process. Let's see these results here.
Okay. Yeah, I think that is in line with what I expected, right? I think, as Jason mentioned in the comments there, routine meetings is how we know. If you've got a good cadence and you really have a good relationship with your clients, and you're meeting with them consistently, you're going to get a pretty good feel about that,
Yeah.
right? And so we think we see about half of the participants here is doing that, but then we see a large part that says maybe we wow them sometimes, but not consistently. And that's kind of like that roller coaster, right? That ebb and flow of like, we did really good. All right, on to the next one until that problem pops up, and then we'll do really good again. And we're always kind of fighting to stay in the good graces of the client. So I think that's honest, and I appreciate people being honest about that.
Yeah. One thing I'll mention, and thanks, Jason, for that comment. I think it's important to make sure you're not in your own little echo chamber with whoever your point of contact is. Because if that's like an office manager, or a technically savvy, employee that kind of been given the reins of managing the IT
Mm-hmm.
relationship, you may not be hearing all points of view across executives and or middle management or other people. And so I think it's good to expand a bit of that blast radius of the conversation, especially for understanding whether everybody's feeling the same way.
Yeah, great.
So on the delivery side, oh, Jason also commented, I also have an open door and the client has my private cell number to report any issues they have as well. That's a challenge, I think, for them to, in an unsolicited way, go tell you the things that they feel are wrong is maybe taboo in some relationships. Unless you're kind of really screwing up royally, they kind of will put up with some of the grace that you created by having a great onboarding process, perhaps, and they won't say things, but they tend to have the ability to fester over time. So it is important to be checking in and not make the assumption that they're going to call you if they feel that something's wrong. All right, so delivery, and let's focus on the VCs because I think we kind of were a little bit more generic in some of the onboarding
Yeah,
purview and so on.
yeah. So this is the question people always ask me, like, what should be in my offer? Right. So this is a great place to start for like your base package. But you need processes again to deliver this stuff. So if you have a really good VC, so like that unicorn who can kind of help do BD, help with the sales process, be the practice lead and all that kind of stuff, or maybe that's you, that's great, but that doesn't scale. So when we want to start getting 2, 3, 5 people in this program, and we're getting to 1 million, 2 million, 3 million in this program, now all of a sudden we run into a brick wall if we don't have these processes in place. And I think you're just going to make your life easier if you have this in place prior to launching, and it's just a proven process you can execute, right? So all that to say is you want to have a way that you can deliver risk assessments on repeat. We talked about that in session 3. There's that playbook that I gave for like a high level view of what I think it should work. Again, you're going to want to flesh that out. And we'll talk about this in the one sample workflow we're going to look at today. And that's the incident response playbook. So you want to have a way that when a client calls in with a problem, whether they are a security client, an IT client, or even a new client, you handle that the same way every time and keep yourself safe, keep your liability to a minimum with all of this, right? And make sure that you're actually serving the client the best way you can. Tabletop exercises, big piece of VCSO value. That's when you get to go in front of the client and actually, force them to drop the veil. As like Luis said, they're not going to call you and say, we don't think our organization is ready to respond to an incident. You have to hold that mirror up, right? So that's super important and a large piece of the VCSO value prop. Again, the client cadence call, like our ongoing touch points. How do we manage those? How do we keep the conversations business centric and strategic? How do we make recommendations, and how do we feed those back into our customer success or account management process when new things are needed, right? All of this needs to be processed out. Performance management. When we do have to do tool reports, right? We have to understand, are the tools doing what they say we're doing? That's part of what a VC, so in a security department does, is say, okay, you have EDR, you have vulnerability management, you have all these things, or vulnerability scanning. Is it installing all the computers? Is it doing what it said it would do? Are we living up to our SLAs? You have to present that in a way that is know your audience. And I have a whole separate webinar on this that I've done, but know your audience of who you're presenting to. But in larger organizations, might have an IT director you're working with in a co-managed scenario where they want all that stuff. So you got to present that to them. Security strategy presentation, your touch points with the executives, where you set policy and you set the roadmap for the next quarter. Highly important to get that right. And again, a good playbook helps you stay on target there. And then finally, if you have a board, or you may be doing just the State of the Union delivery to the executive team, you need to have a way that, again, keeps this on target and keeps this on track. Incidentally, these are all things that we can include in our package. And if we have a way to repeat those processed out, we can just execute them, and we can assign them to different people in our organization. A great example is the performance management report. So if a VC, so one of your higher paid resources, is going in and pulling reports and organizing them, or it's not automated, that's a huge problem. You're wasting a ton of efficiency there. Now, if you can have a junior GRC analyst or somebody even from the help desk who wants to get into security, they can do some of those things, ride shotgun with the VCISO on the report, and all of a sudden you've created a talent pipeline in your organization where the VCISO is freed up to do more customer strategic stuff, but you're also starting to prime somebody to actually step into that role one day. So it's really important to have a process to facilitate that, not just, did I remember to ask them to do it this week or this report, or I'll just handle it this time, right? Having these operational procedures this is the key to scaling, right?
Yeah. Now, Jesse, like, because we're talking about doing a lot of these things for the first time, I want to go back quickly to the tabletop exercise to maybe talk about how critical it is for the MSP to understand how this works by having done it internally, at least, before trying to do this for a customer. Because, if maybe the first time a tabletop exercise might be as painful as getting a shot of penicillin in the eye. And so I think one of those things that you have to know how it feels, what the nuances of the activities are, so you can speak eloquently to what to expect on the client side. This could be perceived as just a distraction and impact to go through this exercise if you can't communicate it properly.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Excuse me. And this speaks to, this is all the continuum. So remember, we talked about in the onboarding, we do an incident response plan and we build that. So the way we have MSPs do that, and this is a key piece, is that when we build that incident response plan, part of that is a procedure where we have a deck and we walk the leadership team through their responsibilities. So it's a workshop that we say, okay, you're the incident commander, you're the executive sponsor, here's what your roles are. Do you agree, or should this be someone else? So we facilitate discussion, right? And then we say, okay, now that we've all agreed on this, here's our incident response plan, here's your workflows for it. And now we're going to just talk through an incident. Now, this is not a tabletop, but it's priming them for that. It's saying, okay, let's say you have ransomware. You incident commander, raise your hand. What do you do? Oh, I do this. Okay, comms leader, who do you have to talk to? Well, boy, I don't know. And then it'll say, okay, that's great. Like, you guys weren't supposed to get this right. This was just like a quick walkthrough. What we're going to be doing now in the future, now that we're launching the program, we're going to set a date for a true tabletop exercise to walk you through all of this. Okay. So it's like that crawl, walk, run approach. We're kind of giving them a trail of breadcrumbs to get started. And so that actually facilitates a much easier graduated way to get into this. And then now to your point about like what's actually in it, CISA, there's a ton of different tabletop exercises out there that you can go look at. Now, yes, we customize these in the Power Grid and provide like a more digestible approach. But if you're simply looking for like what's in a tabletop exercise, go look at the CISA templates. There's plenty of those out there, and you get a good idea of like what does a hot wash afterwards look like, and what does the process look like.
An interesting maybe introduction to a bit of this is having a simple, maybe a scaled down incident response on something simple like somebody lost a laptop. Because many customers have no idea like what to do other than to just maybe call the support desk. He's like, this laptop lost, like there's no call tree, there's no process, nobody knows who needs to be notified. And so it's a great way to, and this should be part of most MSP client relationships in the get-go, right?
Right. Right. Actually, that reminds me, I have a fun scenario on that one where we have a lost laptop and then a ransomware incident, but it turns out that the laptop wasn't related. So I save this for more mature organizations, like try and throw them a red herring. And they're like, oh yeah, with the laptop, it came from the laptop, didn't it? I'm like, did you do this? Oh, we just identified there's a miss in our triage process there. So that's a fun one, but yeah, agreed.
So shall we pull up the incident response playbook? I
Yeah,
think that was one
let's
of the
take
things
a
we
look
want
at
to talk
this. And
about.
I wanted to share this because I am pretty passionate about this. Needs to be something that I think every MSP should have in place for themselves. So this is like the top level. How does an MSP, how do you as an MSP handle the workflow when a client calls in with a potential security incident? What do we do? Right? Usually it's like a big Teams chat and a bunch of messages flying around, which is kind of unavoidable. But I think this is a process that I've really refined over many, many years. And I think really creates, this is the top level, like strategic approach. And then you can dive in and start creating processes, sub-processes within each one of these items. So
All right, let me
I could
find
bring
it.
that up, or if you want to bring it up, Luis.
No, why don't you bring it up if you have it handy?
Okay. Yep. Got it here. All right. Let me know if you're seeing that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to zoom in quickly and kind of move around here. So there's a couple different things that we have to identify for clients, because I think we're probably, most of us in this stage where we have some legacy clients that have IT services, they have some security services. Not all of them have taken our security advice. We've been trying to get them to take our security advice. And so we need to handle those different situations and give a little, we have some gray area. We haven't defined those clear edges, right? So until you go and give risk assessments and clearly outline the risk and make it clear that they're not covered, we have to kind of take this approach. And this works best, by the way, when you've done that, when you've gone and outlined the risk. So obviously we have some sort of security event. We've sent out a bunch of spam emails, or we had a business email compromise, whatever it may be. Is it an IT client? No or yes? Okay. If it's no, is it a security client? We have some MSPs who are doing just MSSP services, so we need to understand that. If they're a security client, right, we're going to have some sort of security event response. So they're a security client of ours. We want to actually go in and triage and verify the scope and nature of the incident. Now, I will say this, I am big on, we don't include incident response as part of our MRR. You talk about that program versus project, right? And this is outside VC, so this is just in our security services. So our security MRR covers the standard detection and operate security operations, right? I always recommend having clients keep a retainer on file for incident response, whether it's $2,000, $5,000. This allows us to drop everything and jump without having to get approval on you to work on the incident. Okay. But we are going to do the triage to verify that it is an incident before we actually do that. So that's how I like to structure the security operations piece, right? So if you are a security operations client, we're going to do the triage, we're going to cover that, but then we're going to decide, is it an incident or not? Or were we able to resolve it within that time? If you are not a security client, you may be an IT client, right? Then we'll do some triage to validate. So we have to do something, right? Your longtime IT client calls in, they haven't moved on security. You're like, well, too bad. You owe us money. That's not the way to do the relationship. You're going to have to eat some work there. So I think you should run triage to validate up to an hour. By the way, you should have separate playbooks for this. You talked about a lost laptop playbook, something every MSP should have in their security operations playbooks. What do we do, right? This is how we can do this in under an hour. So we can say, is this a problem? Is there a security incident? Yes or no? If yes, then we need to say we need that IR management scope of work and retainer. Also, if it's a security client, right, we need to do that as well. Meaning that if they have the retainer on file, great, we just go to work and we start fixing it, okay? If they don't have the retainer on file, now we have to have a separate scope of work. Again, this is something we provide in the Power Grid, a full incident management scope of work that says we're going to do all these things to manage the incident and we're going to actually run with it for you. We also want to interface with cyber insurance. A lot of MSPs miss this. At this point, we should be calling their insurance company if they have it, or we should be pre-approved as a provider if we can get pre-approved to say we're going to bill the insurance company directly. Because I've been part of large incidents, I'm talking $250,000 plus of incident response, where I was having to get payments from the client while they're down of $70,000 ACH transfers because I have to say, we need to get paid or we can't continue to work. Now, this was not like a bad thing, but I'm just like, we're taking on way too much risk. I know you guys are in a bad way, but we got to get paid. And actually the clients were okay with it It's just, you know, if you can avoid that by billing insurance, that's what you want to do, right?
Yeah, I want to correct myself. That's a shot of penicillin in the eye.
Yeah, it's not pretty, man. That particular incident actually was really a great win story. That we presented a risk assessment to the client, they declined, and then they got ransomware. So they were happy to pay, and they said, "Hey, yeah, we took the risk, and we know we messed up, so help us."
Oh, common sense.
So bottom line is, okay, did they sign that? No. Are they a current client? No. Bye. Right? We're not going to waste any more time. This is how we protect our liability. We want to help, but if we don't have our liability stuff sorted prior, we just can't help you, right? Now, if they're a current client and they're like, well, we're not paying for this, you're supposed to help us, then that's got to go to the account plan with executive approval. So we have to have a mechanism to say they're being this way. We need, you know, either the MSP owner or the COO, whoever's that decision maker, to say, okay, we want to try and do the right thing. We're willing to take on the risk and just help them for free, even though we shouldn't. I don't think that's a good idea, but you may or may not do that. Then you're going to perform your incident management. Again, there's process behind that. Were you able to recover in 30 days or under the retainer budget? Yes, then you're done. If not, you got to start invoicing. So you don't want to get, again, I have had clients who I've worked with who got 90 days down the road on an incident and have over $100,000 in outstanding labor and still haven't gotten paid because they didn't set that cadence up front, right? You should be getting progress payments as you're going. Okay, so again, invoice for the current spend. Did they sign and send the ACH? Okay, they didn't do that. Well, we can't work. Then if they did, or if they didn't do it, we need executive approval, right? So we're creating these loops. So I know I took a little bit to walk through this, but I really am very passionate about this is the process you need to have in place at a macro level for your MSP to be able to handle insurance or handle incidents in a defined way. Now, there's a lot of sub processes around this, but if you can get everyone to say we're going to start doing it this way, I think you're going to have a lot less chaos in these types of events. So we're giving that away for free. That's one process that should be in place, right?
That's super awesome, man. I think this is the thing that brings so much clarity to the operation and the process, removes the ambiguity. It creates the right aligned expectations with clients. How transparent have you found MSPs to be in sharing a bit of that incident response process with their clients to establish a bit of that expectation of, you know, payment, accountability, and so on?
Yeah, I think this is not something you can just shoehorn in. Right? This is all part of a continuum, right? This is part of, we got to go through and do that incident or that risk assessment and show them the risk and then say, oh, by the way, because you have this risk, and just so you know, incidents are not covered. We will be asking for this. And there's kind of what this workflow looks like. Now that's part of an ongoing account management process. Now, if you're doing this net new, you're already priming them for this. You know, they're coming in, you're working on an incident response plan. They understand, like in your incident response plan, it's like, you got to pay the retainer. In their plan that they're deploying to their organization. So it's kind of
at the worst possible time, man.
Yeah. So yeah. So to your point, yes, they do go through it with them, but this is not just in a vac. Like, I don't want people to send this to somebody and be like, sign this, or you're not. You know, we hear about these approaches, and so yeah, this is part of a customer success and a customer journey and a customer focused approach to serving the customer. Stewardship.
Yeah, this is great, man. What a wealth of knowledge. Thank you again for sharing. This is session 4 of 6 we're doing. So there's 2 more. The next one is coming up on October 2nd. I'll have a little slide on that in a second. And of course, one of the reasons we're doing this is to bring awareness to Control Map, which is our GSP platform at ScalePad that helps you do this at scale. Tracking all your policies, your activities across many frameworks, not just SOC 2, ISO 27001, but CIS, CMMC, NIST, and so on and so on. So definitely have a look at Control Map. If you're doing this in spreadsheets and tracking things manually, you know, back to our the cow farm reference, that's about as fun as a shot of penicillin in the eye.
Yeah.
And you know, a couple of folks asked about Jesse's contact information and information. Here is the Power Grid, and this is the place where you're going to really help develop a lot of your offering. If you're unsure or if you're kind of doing this for the first time, the peer support is invaluable. And Jesse's experience, totally leverage his expertise and knowledge on this stuff to make this a successful program for your team. And like I said, October 2nd is our next one. Same time, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. It's the same link where you can go register for all the sessions. And then I posted a couple times the link to the resources of all the previous sessions where you can go download the templates and all the other things. In today's folder, which will be posted in a matter of, within 24 hours, 48 hours here, you'll be able to go grab all the stuff that we talked about today as well. And I think that brings us to the end of today's program. Jesse, thank you again so much for your knowledge sharing and expertise on this stuff. I'm so looking forward to session 5 and just getting MSPs further down the path.
We never have enough time to go as deep as we want.
I know there's a lot of homework to do for people, right? So hopefully people have actually been following along and trying to start building the process as they go. But this is one of the challenges of working reactively in this industry as we do, is that it's difficult to make the time unless you've got, really focused that effort on this program.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. It's been a pleasure seeing you all today. Jesse, thank you again so much. Backstage, Julie's been helping with all the logistics. Thanks, Julie. And we'll see everybody on October 2nd. Have a great rest of your day. Ciao.